Good evening folks, Silver here. Today we're exploring two short scary stories. The first exploring a special piano, the second delving into an urban legend. What can we learn from these? Let's find out. Also, just before we begin, only a small percentage of you that listen to these stories are subscribed. So, if you end up enjoying this narration, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe later. With that, enjoy the stories. Number 1. The Pianist by Joe S. Nobles. I am here to tell you the story of my good friend Ivan. Ivan was 15 years old. He was a piano prodigy. He was playing Vivaldi and Beethoven before he could even talk. I met Ivan via a business transaction about a year ago. He was buying my old piano. I should never have sold him the piano. I knew what he was capable of. It was a Steinway grand piano. I had it locked away in a storage unit for years. Ivan saw me in my storage unit one day. He worked there as a temp. He would clean the junk out of old abandoned units. Then he saw the shape of a piano under the thick canvas cover. He inquired about it, and I jumped at the chance to rid myself of it, not considering the consequences. I sold it to him for $1,000. He was quite surprised at how little I wanted. He had offered 10, but I just wanted it gone. I told him that it had been in the unit for 10 years, but I knew it would be in perfect tune. It never loses its tune. I even paid for it to be hauled out of the unit and brought to his home. It was gone within the hour. He was so excited. As he got into his car to head home, I tried to issue a warning, but he didn't hear me. Ivan was never a good listener, in the literal aspect. He could, however, hear a song once and then be able to play it in the exact key within 15 minutes. Ivan arrived at his home, and the piano was already in his music room. It was pitch black. He switched on the lights, and they flickered eerily. The shadows of the fan blades crawled across the ceiling. The piano was sitting in the middle of the floor, open and ready to play. Ivan wasted no time. He went to the piano and sat down on the bench. What happened next should have been enough to scare Ivan off, but he was determined to play. He pumped the sustain pedal a few times to get the feel of it, and he heard a peculiar noise. It sounded like a heartbeat. He pumped it a few more times. The entire house was shaking. Beads of cool sweat rolled down Ivan's forehead. Ivan was a rather adventurous individual, though perhaps more than he should have been. He reached up and positioned his hands on the first chord of his favourite song, Requiem for a Dream. In his left hand was G, B flat, D, and G. In his right was a G octave. Ivan lifted his hands and slammed them back down onto the keys. There was a blood-curdling scream. Ivan slammed his hands over his ears and fell off the bench. The piano stood silent, the last of the scream fading away. As I said, Ivan was more adventurous than most, so he got back on the bench. He lightly tapped a D flat and brought his hands up near his head again, but he heard the dulcet tone of the intended note this time. Ivan, feeling more comfortable, started into the melancholy Moonlight Sonata, another personal favourite of his. All was going well, but when he tried to stand up, he couldn't move at all. His hands and foot started moving on their own, playing Moonlight Sonata, but all wrong. His right hand in the key of D flat, his left in the key of D. It sounded harsh, metallic. He was also playing much faster, much louder. This went on for the rest of the evening. Each time louder and faster. Scratches began to show on the keys he was using. He was nearly melting the ivory. I believe it was around 3 a.m. when Ivan finally did stop. He tore his hands away from the piano and crawled over to the corner of the room. He looked at his hands. His fingers were mangled and broken, a big bloody mess. He glanced back at the piano, and blood was seeping up from between the keys. The flow increased, and the floor was now covered in blood. The scream started again. Ivan inched his way over to the door and escaped the room. He got downstairs and entered his living room. The details are a little fuzzy from this point on, but Ivan hung himself that morning. This is the note he left behind. She's watching. Always watching. Had to end it. All is better. BA, BA, FG, FG, ED, CBA, CED, GBA, GFE, DC. I think Ivan left that string of letters as instructions. I think it was notes to a song. I burned the house down, piano with it. I was too afraid to play the song. I ended it all that night. I spend my days now sitting in the storage unit, just looking at where the old piano used to be. I'm so sorry, Ivan. Number 2. The Woman to Eat the Children by There's the Door. The bloody demonic woman stood in deathly silence as the moon floated above her glaring brown eyes. Her eyes widened, and it seemed as if her gaze could stare into the very soul, wicked or humble. The petrified child looked right into her eyes. She could no longer bear her famished hunger, and immediately fell to her pale knees, her shadow wiping over the child's face. The child shrieked in relentless fear, but there was no escape. She whispered into his ear, "Sleep now, child. Sleep. The children all seemed to run away from me, but you did not. Away ran my friends to become sleepyheads. Please hush now. Sleep now. Dream now." Her dripping black teeth came closer and closer to the boy's face. The boy tried to knock her away when the first solid cut came into his cheek. It did no harm to the reckless villain. Deeper, deeper the teeth went, all the way to the cheekbone. Before the child could begin crying, she started to pull back the skin and muscle inside the cheek, tearing through the face, blood running all over her mouth, dripping down her neck. The boy had no defense. The most piercing scream went out of his mouth as she ripped off the first piece of skin, echoing for miles. Her hands gestured towards his face, coming closer to his face every second. Once the first nail touched his face, all of the others went down and dug into the dirty insides of his muscle. She acted as if she'd never done this before, but in her cold black heart, she knew she had committed this heinous act thousands of times. The deeper her nails dug into his skull, the more the helpless boy's eyes rolled back. She finally decided she had gone far enough, and with all of her force contracted her arms, ripping all the flesh from the right cheek into the air across her side. A trail of thick blood came directly behind it. She started to whisper again. "Don't leave. I enjoyed your stay. But if you must go, that's okay." Grasping the knife in her pocket with no regrets, she took one deep breath. Raised high in the air, the knife went down swiftly. The knife penetrated the skin and skull, entering the forehead and making a large slit in the brain. Her face went down to his forehead once again, and her tongue slowly touched the cut. She began to lick the blood off and chew her way into his forehead. She chewed her food with her grinding teeth and swallowed. She shook her head a little, back into her disguise of sanity. Leaving the corpse on the hard concrete, she turned her head and left, wiping her damp lips with her arm. Each footstep was quiet. She dropped a paper that was in her back pocket. It is believed it was handwritten with ink on papyrus, and the paper foretold the legend. Dr. Larinaga, an archaeologist, was digging through old New York grounds, finding nothing. However, his luck changed when he found this paper. The legend is told in a small story, and goes as the following from a news report source. There was a woman. Her name was unknown. Her life was anonymous. Her parents abandoned her at birth. She walked the filthy streets, teaching herself everything. But she never learned what real food was. She is now a cannibal. They called her Molière Manducaire Fili as her full name because it was Latin for the woman to eat the children. She devoured my 3-year-old daughter, Rachel. It may seem silly, but it's true. I apologize for not being a good writer, but I know her story. She's out there. If you find this paper, please help yourself. Mark Traw, 8th of the 8th, 08. Mark's corpse was found along the streets the next day, with a marking on his chest of 090909. It is presumed to be the time he died, in coordination with the note. Here is the peculiar remainder of this report. However, there is a secret that has not been yet divulged to the public. It was seen in many places, such as Georgia, Florida, New York, West Virginia, Maryland, and even California. The body of Mark Traw was seen hanging from a United States flag in every city of the state, alive. It's claimed that Mark Traw was murdered in the first degree by a cannibal called Moliere. She is a wicked human. If you see her, call the police immediately. If you're looking for Moliere, you need only to go to sleep thinking about her. Sleep, child. Everyone is a child in Moliere's eyes. Sleep.